In today's video, we're going to be talking all about winter traditions that are steeped in folklore and how we might bring them into the modern day to add a little bit of magic and coziness to the season. Winter has always been a rather strange and liminal time that sits right at the intersection of both survival and celebration. For thousands and thousands of years, humans have commemorated this time of year with so many different types of rituals, celebrations, and different traditions. But it's quite a strange time as well, because we find it quite hard to think about this now, living in the modern day with all its comforts and all the things that brings. But for many societies in winters gone by, it would be a very difficult time to be alive. Nothing was growing, it was very cold. There was a serious risk of starvation or freezing to death in shelter that wasn't very good, and so many other things as well, illness and disease. And we have to try and think about winter through that lens when we think about these things, and the idea of really thinking about the time that the sun is going to come back, and when the warmth will return, things will start growing again. And a lot of winter traditions are about really celebrating that and looking ahead to those warmer months. So let's talk a little bit about some winter traditions and how you might bring them into your life in the modern day. So nowadays it's extremely common to have a Christmas tree, and the Christmas tree is an evergreen tree, and there might be other types of greenery that people bring into the home as well. You'll often see wreaths on people's doors or walls, or big pieces of greenery on the mantelpiece, for example, with a lot of different plants that stay green and full of life throughout the winter season. And this is a very ancient tradition, and as with all things in folklore and history, can't quite pinpoint exactly why we do it or where it's come from, but there's a few different reasons that we might do this. The Romans had a festival called Saturnalia, which was celebrated around this time of the winter solstice. And one of the things that they would do is bring greenery into the home to celebrate Saturnalia, to honour the god Saturn, the god of agriculture. We've also got evidence for this in the Celtic tradition. So we've got writers like Pliny the Elder, who has written about the symbolic use of holly, which was believed to ward off evil spirits, and mistletoe, which was a sacred plant to the Druids. He wrote that it was cut down with a golden sickle during rituals, so it's clear that it was a very important plant. As time passed, this sort of continued and other traditions got absorbed and everything sort of smushed together, as always in this part of the world. And then you've got it carrying on into the medieval era as well, with people bringing evergreens into the home. You've got songs like The Holly and the Ivy, which is a Christmas carol, which is basically a blend of that pagan and Christian symbolism. And what the evergreen really signifies is life. It is that everlasting life, the hope that things will grow again, that the sun will return, and all things will be warm and vibrant once more. And that's what the winter is looking toward a lot of the time. A lot of these celebrations, that's what they're really trying to do. So by bringing evergreens into the home, we are looking ahead to brighter days and just celebrating life and the sun. So you could get a Christmas tree, that's a really easy way to do this. You could also go out and gather some things as well. So you can gather holly, ivy, I don't know if you'll find mistletoe, but you know, if you did, or any other sort of evergreens, to bring them in, maybe do some crafts with it, and just really think about what that means. The Yule log is another tradition that is documented, particularly in Nordic culture. So Yule or Yule was the midwinter festival of the Norse people, and there's a few different accounts of what would happen with the Yule log, but it seems to be that the Yule log would be burned for the duration of that winter solstice celebration. If it went out or you let it go out, that was said to be a dark omen and bad luck for the time to come. And often they would save a piece of the log for next year's fire. So that seems to be the main way that the Yule log was used. And then obviously Britain is just a smush of everything, so with Nordic settlers coming in, it sort of got integrated into Britain. You've got mentions of the Yule log in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, in 18th century texts that describe the ceremonial aspects of the Yule log. It was often an oak log, which is chosen for its strength and ties to fertility and protection. And there are some records from rural England about the ashes being gathered and scattered over the fields to ensure a good harvest in the following year. This year I made my very own Yule log, which involved gathering greenery and some other wintry items to decorate a log, and I also used some natural beeswax candles as well, just to create a really special little centerpiece that combines the Yule log and the evergreens. Wassailing is another folkloric tradition, and this is a British tradition, and it comes from the Old English wassail, which means be well. And we've got records of this dating back to the 12th century, but it's extremely likely that it is much older tradition than this, rooted in pagan Britain. So in the medieval texts and agricultural records, they often mention two types of wassailing. So a household wassail, where essentially you just toast with friends and family with maybe a spiced ale or something, and then also the orchard wassail, which I feel like most people know about now, which is something that you do to ensure a good harvest for the next year. And essentially this would be done usually in an apple orchard. So essentially you are trying to wake up the trees, and a lot of the time this would be done in January. So if you go to a modern day wassail, people might be singing together, banging pots and pans, they might have like tambourines, just, you know, making a racket to try and wake up the trees. And there are records of people pouring cider onto the roots of the trees as well and singing to the tree spirits. So essentially just trying to wake them up after the long winter and do a little bit of a blessing onto the orchard for the coming year to hopefully get a really good yield from the trees. So wassailing is definitely making a bit of a comeback. I feel like a lot of traditional folkloric practices are, especially in Britain, people are kind of like trying to rediscover their heritage, and it's really nice to see actually. So if you're interested in going wassailing in the new year, there is a website called Tradfolk, which is putting together a wassailing directory. Basically anyone who's doing a wassail can list themselves on there and you can go along and get involved. So I'm going to be looking for one in the new year as well, and if it sounds like your kind of thing, I would really recommend going for it. You might meet some interesting people there as well who have similar interests. So wassailing is often about singing to the tree spirits to wake them up, or to put blessings on them. And food offerings or drink offerings to spirits is a really big theme in just folkloric tradition in general, but especially in the winter time. And many people who would rather die than call themselves pagan can be found putting up an evergreen tree in their house and leaving out food for spirits, leaving out mince pies for Santa Claus and that kind of thing. And it's funny how the traditions sort of tumble down the years and become what they are today. But leaving offerings for spirits is a practice as old as time. There's archaeological findings dating back to the Iron Age, where they found hearthside deposits of food, suggesting that things have been left maybe for gods, spirits, or the dead. Obviously we'll never know, but there's traditions all over the world, not just in Britain and Ireland, about leaving offerings for spirits. And winter was a really key time for this as well, being a sort of otherworldly liminal time. And there's tradition from Ireland and Britain, and the early Irish sagas describe rituals of leaving meals by the hearth to spirits at this time. Norse tradition also has similar things, And I often talk about household spirits and how, you know, everyone seems to be obsessed with gnomes now. You'll see gnome Christmas stuff in like every shop, and I really feel like it's because we've lost something, and that is a connection to household spirits that has existed for thousands and thousands of years that people don't really do anymore, and we're kind of subconsciously looking for it in these little gnomes. That's my belief anyway. So what is a nice thing to do is just to leave out a little offering for your household spirit. Even if you've never thought about this before, you've not really considered if there is a spirit there, what they could be like, but maybe on the winter solstice, on that special day, you could leave out a little something, some oats, a bit of mead, whiskey, a little biscuit, whatever you want, and just say thank you to the spirit. I hope you're still there, I hope you're around, and yeah, just try and leave a little offering for them. It's a really nice way to just connect to those ancient traditions and just carry them on in the modern day. This dark half of the year is rife for divination practices. So after the Celtic festival of Samhain, essentially modern Halloween, this marks the start of the winter, and this time is closely associated with prophecy. So in Irish mythology, you have ogham sticks, which is like a tree language, that are used for divination. And more modern than that as well, you've also got Roman and medieval sources talking about divination practices in Britain and Ireland. So for example, there is a 14th century manuscript that talks about different fun divination rituals that were done in those 12 days of Christmas, such as interpreting wax that was dipped into water. And Scottish and Irish folklore has various different divination practices, things like putting nuts on the fire to answer questions about relationships and marriage. Even with the suppression of the church over the years, a lot of these superstitious folk practices did continue in secret. So it's definitely a time of the year where this was done, in this kind of liminal time of death and darkness. So you could do this in the modern day. Maybe you want to do a bit of fire scrying, where you look into the fire and the flames, sorry, I just think of Dragon Force. You look into the flames for messages, or maybe you do something like a tarot card pull, whatever you want to do, tea leaf reading. There's loads of different ways where you could do a little bit of a divination practice, and yeah, think about the people who've done this for thousands of years before. And then my final suggestion would be to create some kind of winter charm. So charms are just rife in history. People have been making charms for a lot of things for such a long time, and protection charms are really popular to do. So there's evidence for rowan being used for its protective properties throughout history, and things like hagstones, which are stones which naturally have a hole in. We've got diary entries and pamphlets from the 17th century in England that talk about winter rituals using charms to try and ward off illness at this time of the year. A lot of times there's a bit of overlap with Christian and pagan elements in these things, but there's a lot of different things that you can use. Maybe have a research or just use your intuition to craft a little bit of a charm. Another thing that you could put on is bells, which are often associated with driving away evil spirits, and you could put something together using things from the natural world. You could even put evergreens in it, whatever you want to do, and make a little home protection folk charm, or maybe something to bring in luck for the new year. So there you have it. Those are a few ideas for how you might want to bring some of those folkloric practices from history into the modern day and keep on celebrating. And just really think about this time as a reflective, divining time where you can start sowing seeds for the things to come in the new year and looking ahead to when the sun is going to return. It's all about light and warmth and fire and vitality, and knowing that the spring days are coming, especially the winter solstice, where we've got the shortest day and that longest night. And then it doesn't feel like it sometimes, because January and February just drag on and they're so miserable sometimes, but after the winter solstice, the days are getting longer and the sun is returning, and that's what this is all about, that wheel never ending of the seasons and the cycle of life. So I like to bring some of these folkloric traditions into my modern day life because it just connects me to my roots and my history and potentially what my ancestors were doing. And it's just nice, you know, it's just nice to decorate for seasons, bring greenery in, and just do these things in these dark months. So I'd really encourage you to do it. And if there's anything I've missed out, I'm sure there's so many other things as well. I mean, winter is just full of folklore, from creatures to rituals, practices, stories, songs. It's, yeah, you can tell people were sort of trapped inside, talking and thinking and creating and dreaming in these months. A lot of stories around this time of year. So anyway, as I say, yeah, drop them in the comments if there's anything you do, and I really hope that you got some good ideas from this and you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks.